The basic gist here is advertising is not just this monolithic structure where, like you go to work for an advertising agency and everybody does the same job. Just like any institution, just like any organization, there are different areas that you can work in. And while those areas are absolutely dependent upon each other and very important to have all the pieces there, they're very, very, very different jobs. And so it's important to know what those jobs are to know how the process actually works. One aspect of advertising, the business side of advertising, is the creative side. These are the people who are actually creating the advertisements, right? So these are your graphic designers, these are your content writers, these are the people who are actually developing the ads themselves. This is what people tend to think of when they think of advertising. Is, if they say they want to get a job in advertising, usually they're talking about the creative side, right? They want to produce content for advertising. They want to design logos, or they want to produce commercials, or right. So the creative side of advertising is exactly what it would infer. It's you're the creative force, right? But like all media, like all content creation, you don't have free will, right? You don't have free run to do whatever the hell you want. You have to do what your client wants. But typically speaking, the people who work in creative aren't exactly, let's just say, polished in terms of their ability to interface and interact with clients. And as a result, another key part of the business of advertising is a group of people known as client management. And these are the people who are kind of liaisons between the customer and the agency itself, right? So if you work in client management of advertising, your job is to go get clients, number one, and number two, hold their hand through the process. Make sure that their concerns are heard, make sure that their desires are heard, and make sure that their feedback gets to the creative department in a way that is helpful, that is useful. Clients don't talk directly to the creative, right? In larger agencies and small agencies, sure, right? If you want to start an ad agency out of your garage, you're going to be all in one. But in a large agency, the creative minds don't interact with the clients because they speak different languages, right? And you may have noticed this already in your life. If the more you study film, for example, you start to use terminology and phrases that people who don't have no idea what you're talking about. You talk about movies in ways very different than the common person. And so you really are not even speaking the same language. So it's hard to kind of relate your ideas to them. When somebody who has studied film for a good amount of time watches a movie like Tenet, right? Which I haven't seen yet because I am not going to a fucking movie theater right now. But when somebody who studies film watches Tenet, they're going to talk about different parts of that film than somebody who just casually watches movies, right? Same thing happens with advertising. When you're creating the content, you're worried about things that your client just isn't. Your client is only worried about how's this going to make my business look, how's this going to work, all that. They don't care about the details. They don't care about the font. They don't care about the pixel sizes. They don't care about all the in the weeds stuff. You talk about a frame rate or an ISO, and your client's just going to zone out. They don't give a shit, right? So the creative side does their job. Client management is there to kind of bridge the gap between here's what our clients want, here's what we're doing, how do we make those two things fit together. So client management they don't build anything, right? They don't make anything. They're just customer service. And yet it's a critical component of advertising, and also a very well paid component of advertising. Another job in the industry are people known as media buyers. Media buyers are the ones who actually get the ads out to the public. If you're a media buyer, your typical day involves figuring out what ads need to go out, right? Are they print? Are they radio? Are they, internet ads? And finding the right place for those ads to be put and getting the best possible price for where those ads are going to be placed, right? So if you're a media buyer for Jaeger Advertising, right? I own an advertising firm and you're one of my media buyers. And our creative side has developed a 30-second video commercial for Nerf, right? For Nerf darts. Client management is going to work with creative to make sure that the nerf people are happy with that ad. Creative is going to do their best to create nerf in a positive light, create this image of nerf in a way that's going to get people to buy their product. Once the commercial's done, they come to me, and then I, as the buyer, say, okay, um, it's going to cost us $3,000 to run this on this website, and it's going to cost us $6,000 to run it on this website, and it's going to cost us $4,000 to run it on this website. And if we get a boosted ad on Snapchat, it's going to cost us $12,000. As a media buyer, I figure out where's the best way to spend our money on getting it out there, right? Because again, it doesn't go out for free, right? The airwaves don't just, they don't just take your shit for free. You have to pay them to air it. And again, that's internet, that's radio, that's television. You have to pay for it to be put up there and to be seen. Media buyers tend to have personal relationships with the places that they put a lot of media at, right? So they can leverage those relationships for better prices. If you're a larger firm, if you're a larger marketing or advertising firm, you give NBC, for example, a lot of money in the year, right? Because you advertise on NBC a lot. Well, because of that, NBC is likely to cut you a better deal on your pricing, right? They're not going to charge you as much as they would charge a guy who they've never done business with before. You get better pricing, you get better buying power for where your media is going to go out to. So again, media buyers don't create any content. Media buyers don't work with any clients. All they do is figure out, how do I get the best price? How do I get the best rate for putting this ad out to the public? And the last aspect of the business of advertising is the research department. The research department is typically staffed with people who have very little, if any, experience with the idea of creative advertising, right? The researcher's job is simply to figure out who your market is, right? Who is your market? So if Revlon, right, the makeup company, comes to Jaeger Advertising, and they say, all right, we want to pay you, $250,000 to produce commercials for our company. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to get my research department figuring out, okay, who buys Revlon? What are their spending habits otherwise? What kind of media do they consume? What is the psychology of a Revlon consumer? Because I want to know what's going to speak to them. What is going to affect that audience best, right? Because I not only want to keep the typical Revlon buyer, but I also want to recruit people from other purchases, right? So if they're people who wouldn't otherwise use Revlon, what speaks to them? What's a market that I can get, and how do I get them? And that's what my researchers do, is they go through social science research, they conduct research of their own to figure out the psychological underpinnings of purchasing power. What motivates different groups of people to do X versus doing Y? Researchers are social scientists, right? They're psychologists, they're psychiatrists, they're sociologists. They're thinking about, how does this data help us fulfill the mission? Not, is it pretty? Not, is the font correct? They're concerned with, how does my audience, or my desired audience, think? And how can I manipulate that to better serve my purposes? And again, all four of these areas have to work together. They have to come together for a successful advertising firm, right? For your company to succeed. Because it's incredibly rare to find individuals who can do all four things, right? You typically have to have kind of a specialization in those things. Every part of this work is critical, because if you don't have good research, you're going to put your ads in the wrong place, and you're going to be saying the wrong things to the wrong people. Right? If you don't have good client management, well, then they're not going to keep doing business with you. If you don't have good media buyers, then again, the wrong people are going to see what you need, or you're going to be spending way too much money on getting the message out, and you're wasting your clients' money. And if you don't have good creative people, then you just got a bunch of generic, brands, right? You just got a bunch of boxes, white boxes with black font on it, right? Nobody cares. So you need all of these elements to come together to have a successful marketing or advertising firm. Even though they work together, they don't really interact with each other a whole lot. They're kind of different houses, all in the same town, I guess you could say. Some of the financial aspects of advertising that this all builds to, right? How does the money work in advertising? Well, one is what's called a rate card. And this is the first thing that you develop when you want to go into advertising. When you want to go into advertising and marketing, the first thing you do is you create your rate card. And your rate card is simply a menu, right? It's here's what my rate is for this type of work, right? So for me, for example, when I do independent video production work, training videos, commercials, things like that, right? My rate is 150 an hour for production, and I charge 150 an hour for post-production. For graphic work, for motion graphic work, I charge $200 an hour. And I have that all laid out so that when a client comes to me and says, all right, here's what we want to do, I say, okay, here's my rates. And then I tell them, all right, well, given, based on the job that you want, based on what you're explaining to me, it's going to be about 8 hours of production time. It's going to be about 20 hours of post-production time, and probably about 7 hours of motion graphics time. So I can give them an accurate quote. And by having that rate card, it gives that client a sense of security that I'm not making this shit up as I go, right? I'm not giving you a rate based upon your shirt. I'm giving you a rate based upon, here you go, I have a menu, right? I have this list here. In television advertising, typically when it comes to the media buying side, right? They have it real simple. It's just a sheet of paper that every salesperson at a TV station has on their desk. That says, okay, for a 30-second commercial that's going to air 7 times in a week, this is our rate. For a 30-second commercial that's going to air 28 times in a week, this is our rate. If you want it to air 5 times during Wheel of Fortune, this is our rate. It's all clearly laid out so that regardless of who you're dealing with, you know what that price is going to be. And again, this is really important in work like advertising and all creative work, to be perfectly frank. Excuse me, not COVID. It's going to be important in all creative work because if any of you have ever done any kind of creative work, photography or graphic design or anything like that, people all the time are like, oh, why can't you just do it for exposure? Fuck you. That's why I can't do it for exposure. Because if you were a plumber, nobody would say, could you do it for exposure? Right? If you were a cook, nobody would say, do it for exposure. And for some reason in the creative fields, people think, oh, well, how expensive can it be? Because all I'm doing is asking you to use your brain. Well, that brain has value, right? And that rate card not only gives your client the sense that, see, like this is consistent, but it also gives a very clear established, this is work, right? This is work. It's not manual labor, but it is work. And so every advertising agency, one of the first things they do is figure out, all right, what are we going to charge? What are we going to charge for what kind of work that we do? Another important concept in the financial side of advertising is ratings. And we talked a little bit about this when we talked about radio and how Arbitron had cornered the market on radio ratings until Nielsen came in and eventually weaseled them out. Ratings is incredibly important because we need to know where the audience is. Because the more people are going to potentially see it, the more I'm going to charge for that ad. The more I'm going to charge for that time. So in advertising, we can never, ever look away from that concept. We can never ignore the concept of ratings. Are ratings perfect? No, God, no. It's an incredibly flawed system, but it's the only system we have. And if we're going to establish some kind of sense of fairness for client and for creator, we have to have some kind of an objective metric to base it off of, whether it's flawed or not. And that's why ratings are so important in advertising. You also have CPM, or cost per thousand. If you're wondering right now, how in the hell do you get CPM from cost per thousand? It's because CPT is a term that was already used. So they went all Roman numeral on their asses, and thousand in Roman numerals is M. So cost per M, cost per thousand. Cost per thousand is cost per, depending on the industry you're in. If you're dealing with print, it's cost per thousand prints, right? Cost per thousand run. If you're dealing with digital, it's cost per thousand view, right? Cost per thousand views. So if I'm an advertising agency and I'm selling your company advertising, I'm going to tell you, yeah, we cost about three cents per thousand views. We have about a 3 cent CPM. And again, this is one of those things where the people outside of the industry are like, what the fuck does that even mean? 3 cent CPM doesn't mean you pay me 3 cents for every 1,000 people who see it. It means you're going to pay me $2,000 to create this commercial. It's going to go online based on how many people are expected to see it. I'm expecting a couple million people to see it. So your, $2,000 investment is only going to cost 3 cents for every 1,000 people who see it. You want a low CPM is what I'm saying, right? The lower your CPM, the more bang for your buck you're giving your client. I don't want to spend $700 CPM because that means that I'm paying a lot of money for less people to see it. A low CPM means a lot of people are seeing it for less money. Okay? So as an advertiser, I want to broadcast, I want to sell myself on my low CPM. A newer idea in advertising that is so scary is what's called performance-based advertising. Performance-based advertising is a new model that should never have seen the light of day. It's horrible. But performance-based advertising is the idea that I get paid based upon the performance of the ad. So, for example, I make a commercial for Bacher, right, for Bacher Auto Sales. And I have a performance-based pay system with Bacher. I put that ad out there and I haven't seen a dime, right? They haven't paid me shit. I only get paid based on how much their sales increase after the ad goes out. So if I make an ad and it goes to air, as it were, goes online on October 30th, and in the month of November, Bacher sees a 38% increase in sales, I get a cut of that 38% increase, right? My pay as the content creator is directly tied to the performance of the product I'm advertising. Now, as a content creator, that can be a huge boom. Because if I'm getting paid a flat rate, right? Again, if I just get paid $2,000 to make your 30-second spot, if that commercial becomes the most successful commercial of all time, I don't see another dime. I made my 2,000 and that's it. I'm done. But in a performance-based model, if I make this 30-second spot and it blows up, right? It goes viral. It has millions of views and it creates this incredibly huge, economic windfall for my client. Well, then I'm making a shit ton of money off of that one project. On the downside, I could virtually get paid nothing. I could get paid next to nothing if the ad doesn't create sales. Even if the ad does create a shit ton of sales, that's not great for the client because they don't know how much they're spending on advertising at that point. And that should be terrifying to a client, right? To not know what your price is, not know what your cost is for these things. The other major flaw in a performance-based advertising model is it assumes, and I mean assume in the worst possible way, that advertising directly ties to sales. If we were to believe the philosophy of the performance-based model, you will all do what I tell you if the ad is good enough. And hopefully by now, at this point in your lives, you should realize that just ain't true. Hopefully by now, at this point in your experience of the world, you at least understand that much. That ads cannot make you do something. You can see a brilliant ad and never buy the product. Doesn't mean the ad was bad. Doesn't mean the content creator did a bad job. It means I just didn't want the fucking product. Right? I will never buy an Audi. Right? I will never buy an Audi in my entire life. I have zero interest in that vehicle. But it's not because their commercials suck. It's not because their advertising is bad. Right? So again, this is a really, like, I get the incentive. I get why some people like this. Because again, man, think of the upside. But fuck, is there a ton of downside there? Right? There's a ton of downside there. So I personally don't like it. The last term, financial term that's important to know, is the click-through rate, or the CTR. This is only applicable to online advertising, right? Social media and interactive media both. The click-through rate is how many people click on the ad. If 12,000 people see my ad, but only 3 people actually click on it, that's not a very good performance, right? CTR is really a performance evaluation of the advertisement. It's not enough to have people see it. I want them to click on it. I want them to engage it, to interact with it, so that they go to my company's website, so that they go to my product's website. That's what I really want in advertising, right? I mean, ultimately, what I want is their sales. I want their money. But if they're not going to click on the ad, then there's no way I'm going to get their money. So you want to have a high CTR, and you'll see advertising companies, advertising firms, well, again, they'll sell themselves on their CTR, right? They have a high CTR rate. Funnily enough, a couple of years ago, Highland Community College decided that we were going to hire an advertising consultant, basically. They brought this person in, right? And they they impressed the shit out of the marketing department of the college. They were totally impressed. The president of the college, right? All these people who were these high up administrative positions thought this company was amazing. Well, then they had a meeting where they allowed any employees to actually meet this firm and ask any questions they might have. Now, I'm literally the only employee on campus who has any experience or background or education in the field. I'm the only one. So when I go to this meeting to meet with these people, I was asking them very basic, very simplistic questions, like, what's their CPM, right? Can I see your rate card? What kind of click-through rate do you have? These are things that you now understand. You, first-year students in college, most of you now have this information. The advertising firm that we hired couldn't answer those things, which blew my fucking mind. That right away I knew. I was like, okay, well, we're dealing with somebody who's an idiot. We're dealing with amateurs. I'm sure they're lovely people and there's a lot of things they're good at, but advertising ain't it. Because they can't answer the most basic. It would be like going to a mechanic and they don't know what an oil change is, right? That's the equivalent. Would you hire a mechanic who doesn't know where your gas tank is? Hell no. We hired an advertising company who doesn't know what a click-through rate is. So it sounds like jargon for the sake of jargon. It sounds like just a bunch of gobbledygook to make people impress each other. But this terminology is important because it not only, number one, makes it easier to communicate these ideas, but number two, it's kind of a nice little password system to figure out if that person actually knows what the fuck they're talking about, right? Is this because anybody can say they're in advertising. Anybody can say like, oh yeah, I'm a content creator. Okay, but are you actually, or are you just a dude with a camera? And these are good indications of whether or not they're a professional or they're just a dude with a camera. One of the most important things I want you to take away from this whole discussion about advertising is that advertising costs money. It makes money, yes. It increases the profile of your client, but it costs money. Advertising ain't free. And yes, we've already talked about that idea a few times. We talked about the cost of advertising a few times. But I want you now as a consumer to think about this, right? In 2012, right? 2012, so a little bit dated, but not an outlier year whatsoever. In 2012, American businesses spent $161 billion in advertising. So if you take all companies in the United States and you combine them, you put them all together, they spent $161 billion just to sell you shit. If you break that out by the population of the United States in 2012, that means American companies spent $512 per person, per man, woman, and child. Right? In 2012, my daughter was born. She counts as part of that $512 per person. They spent on average $512 to advertise to my newborn daughter. Again, on average, not literally. They didn't literally target my daughter. Dear God, that's an insane amount of money. Right? I hope I realize if we get into numbers like this, it's hard to kind of rationalize them. It's hard to relate to them. But please, at the very least, understand that that is just an ungodly amount of money. Just on advertising, not on producing, not on distribution, not on overhead costs, not on anything required for that product at all. Just advertising. You should care because that cost is factored into consumer pricing. You're paying for that advertising. When Coca-Cola spends nearly $1 billion on advertising every year, every fiscal year, Coca-Cola spends almost $1 billion on advertising. They don't just eat that cost, right? Where do they get that $1 billion to pay the advertising firms? From their sales. When you buy a can of Coke, you're not just paying for the water, you're not just paying for the syrup, you're not just paying for the aluminum, you're not just paying for the shipping, you're not just paying for the labor, you're also paying for the advertising. The money that Coca-Cola spends on commercials and print ads and billboards is ultimately paid for by you, the consumer. This is why generics always cost less. They don't advertise. They don't have that cost built in. It blows my mind how expensive a Snickers bar is in the vending machines on campus. Like that's my go-to. Like I miss breakfast. I better eat a Snickers, right? So I guess what I pay attention to in the vending machine in Building M, right next to my office, a Snickers bar costs $1.35 for a fucking Snickers bar. It's a Snickers bar. Is there some kind of worldwide shortage on nougat I wasn't aware of? No. Snickers, yes, they have to pay for their resources. They have to pay to get their chocolate and their nougat and their wrapper, and they have to pay for the ink that goes on the wrapper, and they have to pay for their distribution of those things. They have to pay for the labor hours and all that. Sure. But I wonder how much of that $1.35 that I'm spending on a Snickers bar is paying for the commercials I'm going to see during the Super Bowl. How much of that $1.35 is going towards convincing me to spend the next $1.35? No matter what product it is you're purchasing, whether you've seen an ad for it or not, you're paying for the ads for that product. right? And that's why we need to be aware of advertising, not just as media professionals, not just as people looking to go into the field, but as just normal, everyday American consumers. The more advertising is done, the more products cost. It really is that simple. It is a direct relationship. And if you like, having money, you should care because capitalism. So, what are some of the criticisms of advertising? Well, I don't know if you've noticed. I've already hinted at quite a few. Uh, one of the biggest is that it adds to the cost of products. Damn it, unnecessarily. It unnecessarily adds to the cost of products. It doesn't do me any good. I see zero benefit from that amount of money I spend on a product. If I buy a bottle of detergent for $10, none of that $10 is going towards something that benefits me. None of that's not true. Let me rephrase that. Hold on a second. If I buy a bottle of detergent for $10, part of that money is going towards my own benefit because it's allowing me to use the product, right? It's a product I want, it's a product I'm using. But there's a certain chunk of that money that is just going off into no help for me, right? It doesn't benefit me at all. Right? Would you buy a sandwich knowing that they're going to charge you an extra $3 just, because they just wanted it? They figure you probably saw the storefront, so they need to charge you $3 for seeing the storefront. Right? It's just it's absurd, but we just go along with it. We just go along with it. No problems whatsoever. Another criticism is that it causes people to buy products they just don't need. It builds into the culture of consumerism. I mentioned this before. Like I have a whole garage just full of shit, right? Just stuff. Because I'm like, oh, that looks good. I should get that. And it's not because I went and saw a commercial and I'm like, must buy. Most of the stuff that's in my garage right now is stuff that I haven't seen a commercial for. I haven't seen an advertisement for. I saw in a store. And the packaging appealed to me. And the packaging helped convince me this is something that could benefit me, right? A lot of the stuff in my garage are like power tools, right? Woodworking tools. I'm like, oh yeah, I should get this. Again, I didn't see a commercial for them. Sometimes it's just that I saw them in the store and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that does look like it would be helpful. Or I saw them being used in other media and went, oh fuck, I want something like that. True story. Just yesterday, I went on Amazon and added to my wish list a wood scribing tool. What the fuck is a wood scribing tool? It's just a kind of a stick with a wheel and a razor blade, so that you can accurately and clearly mark consistent distances from the edge of a piece of wood. Is there another way that I could consistently measure the distance from an edge of wood without buying a marking gauge? Absolutely there are, because people have been doing it for thousands of years without a marking gauge. Hell, I've been doing it for a few years without a marking gauge. I don't need a marking gauge. But I saw it and I was like, huh, that would be convenient. And we like to confuse convenient with necessity, right? That would make my life a lot easier, means I should have it. No. Advertising causes people to buy products they simply don't need. That not only leads to, financial concerns, but it also leads to environmental concerns. Americans throw away a whole bunch of shit. We throw away a lot of shit that we didn't need to begin with. I mean, landfills are just overflowing with stuff nobody ever fucking needed, but ended up buying because advertising swayed them. It's bad, y'all. It's bad. Advertising also reduces competition and fosters monopolies. Now, this is one that's probably not as clear on the surface as the other two. The other two are pretty easy to go, oh, well, yeah, I see that. How does advertising reduce competition and foster monopolies? Well, like I said, paying for advertising means you have to have the money ahead of time, right? I can't buy an advertisement on credit. I can't pay for marketing on my word and like, oh, I'll pay it later, right? Unless I'm using the performance-based model, but if I'm using that, I'm an idiot anyway. Advertising is only available to companies that already have money. Up and coming companies, new startup companies, don't have the money to advertise the way that established competitors do. And so it's real easy to keep competition down if you're already succeeding. It's easy to edge out new competitors because you can flood the market. You can flood the marketplace with your advertisement. Why do you think there are only two major soda manufacturers in the United States? Do you think that nobody else has ideas about pop? Do you think that the idea well has run dry for carbonated beverages? It's because the ability to get off the ground, to get noticed, to get recognized is so hard when everyone already knows the established products that can generate millions of dollars each year in advertising. Right? A lot of newer products, newer companies get immediately drowned out of the marketplace because they can't afford the range of advertising that established, powerful, well-respected, well-built companies already have. And so in that way, advertising reduces competition and helps companies build and maintain monopolies. This is becoming less of a concern in the digital age because anybody can do a Facebook Live. Anybody can do an Instagram Live. But those things are never going to fully compete with national brand advertising. Right? If I build a better mousetrap, as the old saying goes, I don't really have the money to put together really nice ads and buy airtime on national networks. I don't have that money. I mean, yeah, I can put shit out on social media and hope it picks up, but there's a really good chance it doesn't pick up. There's a really good chance it doesn't go noticed. And my better product is just lost to time because I wasn't able to get people to see it. Meanwhile, the inferior products that are just established have all kinds of money to let people see it. Advertising has problems, is I guess the point I'm trying to get across here. Advertising causes issues, creates issues, perpetuates issues. So like I said the other day, I was very upfront. I have a healthy dose of skepticism. I have moral qualms with the advertising world. And these are just some of those reasons. Right? There are serious problems with advertising, not least of which is like, I don't like spending money on it. I hate the fact that part of my money goes to paying for stupid ads. I love the Snickers product. I do. I'm a big fan of that candy bar, but I hate their ads. And I hate the fact that me liking their product helps support them making stupid ads. I don't have a better solution. Let's be clear about that. I don't have I don't know how to fix it. I'm just saying it bothers me. I hate the fact that we spend a lot of money that we shouldn't spend on products we just don't fucking need. Right? I hate that there's an as seen on TV aisle in almost every store you go to these days. In Walgreens and CVS and Walmart, there's an as seen on TV aisle. Hell, in Menards, there's an as seen on TV section. It bothers me. It really bothers me. And at the same time, here's my cognitive dissonance working overtime. At the same time, I always go by those aisles. I always stop and look. Like I said, I have a whole garage full of shit I don't need. You know, there's my cognitive dissonance. I hate them, and God, I'm the reason they exist at the same time. It's just terrible. So be skeptical of advertising, people. Damn the man. And be on the lookout for those BLM and Antifa terrorists. Remember, they're getting ready to riot. It's going to happen any day now, guys. Any day now, according to Joan from my neighborhood. Any day now. Get ready. All right. Well, we will pick the rest of this up on Wednesday. In the meanwhile,